Verstappen's Miami upgrades just leaked, and they're so extreme, rival teams are already worried. A completely redesigned RB22. Up to 10 kilograms removed. A full aerodynamic reset from front wing to rear. And a hidden gain of nearly half a second per lap, when combined with the new FIA rules. But here's the part that changes everything. This isn't just about speed anymore. It's about control. Because the same car that was unpredictable just weeks ago might now be perfectly stable. And when Verstappen has a car he can trust, he doesn't just fight. He dominates. It started with a problem that Red Bull couldn't ignore anymore. Not a lack of speed. A lack of understanding. Because the RB22 wasn't just slower than expected, it was unpredictable. Inconsistent. A car that behaved one way in the simulator, and a completely different way on track. And in Formula 1, that's the worst possible situation. Because when your data doesn't match reality, you're not developing the car. You're guessing. Every setup change becomes a risk. Every upgrade, a question mark. And that's exactly where Red Bull found themselves after the first races. At the same time, the issues were stacking up. Up to 10 kilograms overweight. That alone, costing around 0.3 of a second per lap. Then came the deeper issue. Aerodynamics. Red Bull pushed one of the most aggressive concepts on the grid. Ultra-narrow side pods. A design meant to maximize efficiency, reduce drag, and unlock performance. But instead of controlling airflow, it destabilized it. The air feeding the floor became turbulent, chaotic, unpredictable. And in this era of Formula 1, the floor is everything. That's where downforce is generated. That's where grip is created. So if the airflow feeding it is wrong, the entire car suffers. Less downforce, less stability, less confidence. And confidence is everything. Because Verstappen doesn't just drive fast. He drives at the limit. Every lap. Every corner. And without trust in the car. That's impossible. But it didn't stop there. Because the weight distribution made everything worse. Too much mass in the wrong places. The suspension working outside its ideal range. The car bouncing, reacting differently every time. And Verstappen? Forced to adapt, instead of dominate. Then came the most unexpected weakness. The starts. Red Bull losing positions immediately. One of the worst launch systems on the grid. A combination of low torque at low speed and poor energy deployment. Which meant races were compromised before they even began. So now you see the full picture. A car that's heavy. Unstable. Difficult to understand. And losing positions instantly. That's not just a slow car. That's a broken system. And Red Bull knew it. They didn't need small improvements. They needed a complete reset. A transformation. What they called a second launch of the season. And this is where the story takes a turn, because what leaked isn't just an upgrade. It's a complete redesign of how the RB22 works. Red Bull didn't try to fix the symptoms. They went straight to the cause. Airflow. The moment they realized the entire car was being limited by unstable air, they made a decision. Change everything. And it starts with the most visible and most important piece. The side pods. Completely redesigned. The original version was extreme, ultra-narrow, aggressive, almost too ambitious. But it failed to create the pressure needed to guide airflow properly. Now, the new design flips that philosophy. Wider at the top, sharply sloping down toward the floor. Creating a controlled pressure zone, feeding clean, stable air into the most critical part of the car. The floor. Because in this generation of Formula 1, the floor is where performance lives. If the airflow reaches it correctly, downforce increases dramatically. If it doesn't, the car becomes unpredictable. Before Miami, Red Bull couldn't control that airflow. Now, they can. And that single change transforms everything. But here's where it gets deeper. Because airflow isn't just about one component. It's a chain. From the front wing all the way to the rear. And Red Bull rebuilt that entire chain. The front wing now includes new elements on the end plates. Not for raw speed, but for control. These elements clean the air before it even reaches the body of the car. Less turbulence. More precision. Then comes a detail that most people would miss. A deflector near the halo. A concept inspired by Ferrari. Its job is simple: redirect airflow over the cockpit toward the rear. Feeding the engine cover. Feeding the rear wing. Keeping the airflow connected and stable. And finally, the rear section. The engine cover reshaped. The shark fin redesigned. All working together to stabilize airflow at high speed. Because if the rear is stable, the driver feels it instantly. Confidence under braking. Confidence on corner entry. Confidence when applying throttle. Now step back and look at the full picture. Front wing controlling the air. Side pods guiding it. Halo deflector redirecting it. Rear bodywork stabilizing it. This isn't an upgrade package. It's a complete aerodynamic system. And when that system works, the car stops fighting itself. But there's another layer, one that makes this even more dangerous. Weight. Up to 10 kilograms removed. And that's not just about going faster on straights. That's about balance. Because before Miami, the RB22 wasn't just heavy. It was unbalanced. Weight in the wrong places, affecting suspension, affecting grip, affecting behavior. Now, that weight is gone and redistributed properly. And suddenly, the car responds exactly how it should. Sharper. More predictable. More precise. But here's where everything connects. Because all of these changes arrive at the exact moment the FIA adjusts the rules. And those changes? They remove the very behaviors that made the RB22 so difficult to drive. Super clipping becomes smoother. No more sudden resistance. No more unpredictable braking. Energy deployment becomes more consistent. And even the start system indirectly improved. Fixing one of Red Bull's biggest weaknesses. So now everything aligns. The car becomes stable. The behavior becomes predictable. The weaknesses disappear. And Verstappen? He finally has what he's been missing all season. A car he understands. And when Verstappen understands the car, he doesn't adapt to it. He controls it. And that's when things become dangerous. Because that's the version of Verstappen no one on the grid wants to face. And now, everything comes down to one moment. The moment where leaks become reality. Because no matter how advanced this package looks, no matter how perfect the data seems, Formula One only respects one thing: lap time. And Miami will expose the truth instantly. But here's the problem. Red Bull doesn't have time. One practice session. Just one. 60 minutes to understand a car that has been completely transformed. New aerodynamics. New balance. New behavior in every corner. Everything Verstappen felt in the first races is now irrelevant. And that creates pressure. Real pressure. Because if the setup is even slightly wrong, if the balance isn't perfect from the first run, then all that performance stays hidden. Too much front grip, the rear becomes unstable. Too little downforce, the tires overheat. Energy deployment not perfectly aligned, and acceleration feels inconsistent. And those small issues, they don't stay small. They grow. Corner after corner. Lap after lap. Until the car becomes difficult to drive again. But here's where everything flips. Because if Red Bull gets it right, if they find that narrow window where everything works together, then the RB22 becomes something completely different. Not just faster, usable, predictable. A car that responds exactly how Verstappen expects. And that's the key. Because Verstappen doesn't need a perfect car. He needs a car he understands. Give him that. And he creates the difference himself. Braking later. Carrying more speed. Finding grip where others don't even look. And suddenly, lap times appear that don't make sense. But there's one moment where all of this becomes visible. Qualifying. 1 lap. No excuses. No strategy. Just pure performance. Because if this upgrade works, you won't need analysis. You'll see it. On the timing screens. If Verstappen jumps forward. If he suddenly fights for pole again. Then everything we've built toward becomes real. And once he starts at the front, everything changes. Clean air. No traffic. Full control of the race. And when Red Bull controls the race, they become incredibly hard to beat. But if they miss it, if the car isn't fully understood yet, then all that potential stays locked. Fast, but inconsistent. Competitive, but unpredictable. And that's the risk of bringing such a massive package into a sprint weekend. Because you don't just need speed. You need clarity, instantly. And that's the real battle in Miami. Not just against Ferrari. Not just against Mercedes. But against time. Against complexity. Against the risk of not unlocking what you've built. But here's the final piece. Red Bull doesn't need to dominate immediately. They just need to get close. Because once they're close, everything changes. They start understanding the car. The data becomes real. The development becomes precise. And race after race, they improve faster than anyone else. That's what has defined Red Bull for years. Not just speed, but evolution. And if Miami is the moment they finally understand the RB22, then this isn't just a comeback. It's the beginning of something much bigger. Because once Verstappen has a car he trusts, once he can push without hesitation, once everything aligns, there's no slow progress. There's a surge. And that surge is what terrifies the rest of the grid. Because it doesn't just close the gap. It erases it. And if that process begins here, then the real question isn't whether Verstappen can win again. It's how long it takes before no one can stop him.